Welcome back to another episode of Practical and Prophetic, the YouTube podcast, where I am your host, Tara McDaniel, or some of you know me as Learn with Tara. And listen, I am elated about this particular episode. I have a guest here, and we are going to talk about a redemptive path forward. Yes. Now, this isn't a general story. This man's story is filled with so many different dynamics, and to see where God has brought him now is mind-blowing. So before we get into it, and before I introduce you to my guest, I want you guys to make sure you hit that notification bell, make sure you subscribe, and comment. Let a girl know what you think, right? Once you see this, I want you to make sure you talk to me in the comments and let me know. Share it with somebody else, because I'm telling you, this story is about to really, really impact and shine some light on what God is able to do despite anything, okay? So without further ado, I have my brother, my big bro, a phenomenal philanthropist, a leader, an influencer, founder, business owner, entrepreneur, minister, father, all that. We got Anton Bruce Wayne Lucky in the building.
Man, thank you for having me.
You are so welcome, bro. Thank you for coming.
Man, look, before we get started, I just got to say, man, you're looking nice, you're looking well, you well together.
Okay,
I like the whole ensemble, all the way down to the toes, man. Learn with Tara. But thank you for having me, though.
Thank you. Listen, I don't know. I'm not normally nervous, but I'm nervous. I've worked with you. You brought me on projects and stuff like that. But I'm nervous because I'm sitting in the presence of greatness, and I'll tell you, like, it really is an honor. So, I want the people to really know a little bit about your backstory before we get into like who you are today.
Yeah.
So one thing that always blows me away is knowing that you were the original founder of the East Dallas Bloods. How many years ago?
Man, that was many moons ago.
Okay.
Many moons ago. Yes, I was the founder of, one of the founders of 415 East Dallas Bloods.
Yeah. And so this was around, was this the 80s, the 90s?
It was early 90s, like very early 90s.
Okay. Yeah. So where were you at that time? Like, what age were you? What was going on in Anton's world?
Man, it was like watching the movie Colors. It was like watching Boys in the Hood. Yeah. It was that scene. You know, it was right when crack cocaine had hit Dallas, hit the neighborhoods. There was a lot of stuff going on back then. I mean, it was typical what you would see in the neighborhood, what you would see in the community that was happening. Drugs, everything was happening. It was right at the beginning when they was busing us to other schools. It was right when gangs had infiltrated Dallas. See, back then, Dallas was Crips had established in Dallas, right, at the particular time. In our neighborhood in East Dallas, we didn't have no gang affiliation, although we wore red, but we never had a gang affiliation. But we would have, fights with other neighborhoods, like neighborhoods who were probably like 1 mile up from us, We would just fight these kids for no reason. And they had already identified with the Crip gang, but we didn't, right? But we just fought them. I mean, it was just like natural, like if they didn't grow up in your neighborhood, that person was an enemy to you. And it was, when Colors came out, when that movie came out, we realized that the enemies to the Crips was the Bloods. And we said, well, we've been fighting these guys, so I guess we've got to be the Bloods. And we started the first Blood gang in Dallas.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what age range were you?
It's around about 13, 14, somewhere up in there. Yeah, 13, 14, somewhere up in there. But I got to say this, even before then, though, I got to add this part to it, that prior to that, I was an A honor roll student. I was a talented and gifted student. I remember my mother having conversation with the school about moving me up a couple of grades. Cause that's just how, because my father went to prison when I was 9 months.
Okay.
And he ultimately did 37 years. And so for me, mama working long hours to put food on the table.
Yeah.
I put all of my talents into school, so I became like a nerd in school.
Yeah.
But I still came from a family that was pretty dominant in the neighborhood, who were, like we was a big family because nobody in my family got married. So our last name Lucky, so we had like the biggest family in the projects in the neighborhood, and so we had a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So we had the biggest. They called us the Lucky Gang back then.
Oh.
And I was going to school, getting good grades. My grandparents became my primary caretakers. They were the ones who would tell me how much they appreciated me being smart. Because back then I was real skinny and I had a big head. And my cousins used to meddle me. They used to call me Blimpy, right? Like the Goodyear blimps, and my head was big. But my grandparents, my grandfather, my grandmother used to be like, baby, that's because you smart. You got a big head because you smart and you're going to be a leader. And that made me feel good. They made me feel good.
Right.
And so I love like bringing the good grades home to them because they would console me and give me those praises. But no amount of praises could suffice for what I was dealing with when I walked out the house or when I walked out to school.
Yeah.
No amount of praise, because the neighborhood said that you had to be tough, that survival of the fittest, that the smart kids got bullied, right? So I end up embracing this duplicity where I was trying to be the good kid in school, but then hung with my cousins and them to be, the bully, right? Yeah. And so imagine trying to walk that line, trying to be good in school because you want to do good, and then being a bully when you walk outside the school.
Right. That is definitely a juxtaposing situation. Like it's the pressures of, what you're most influenced by is outside and at school, like you said, is where kids spend the most time.
Right.
You don't spend the most time at home.
Nah.
You know what I'm saying? And the myth is, out here there's this common thought that if a person went down a bad path or, got involved in some kind of crime or violence, whatever, things were all bad at home. But that's not always true.
It's not always the case.
That is not always. You had great influences, and I can also identify with some things in my past. I had great influences in my life at certain points in my life. At the end of the day, as a kid, your mind is still being shaped.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so part of your story is, you did that then, but now you are right in the face of kids that are dealing with that today.
Right.
You are influencing those kids in the opposite direction. But before we get into that, so you and some friends and some family members started one of the original East Dallas Bloods. That led you into a life of crime, violence, heartache, pain, and jail.
Right.
What happened? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
in short, because you're like, I don't know, I can't tell you all of it, but
I'm gonna give you the short Cliff Note version. But I remember it led me down this path. I remember myself started slipping and my life sped out in front of me, and I was trying to catch up. But it landed me. I'm gonna tell you what happened. Started selling drugs, all that good stuff, and kind of rose in the rank where I was. I only had drug houses, so I wasn't no longer selling drugs, and I was making a lot of money. But one day, I come by the house because the system that I had a whole system, man, where somebody sold, somebody washed out, somebody picked up the money, somebody cooked, I had a whole system. And one day, a guy, and I'm telling the story because I think it all played into the question that you asked, that you about to ask, how I get to this point. But I never forget pulling up at that house because my guy who's supposed to picked up the money and gave them to read them up was out of pocket. And I was on my way somewhere, and I said, I'll come get the money. And when I pulled up, the police raided right when I pulled up.
Ooh.
Right when I pulled up, the vans were coming from everywhere.
Wow.
And I laid down, and the way I had it set up, on one side of the street, I had a house on one side of the street. That's where all the business get taken care of. On this side of the street, you don't never have nothing on this side of the street. And so when they came onto the side of the street that no business happens. And I know he just called me, so he don't have no drugs because I'm coming to get the money to read him up, right? And when they put us on the ground, I recognized this narcotic officer through his mask, right? It was a black officer who always said he was gonna get me, but he could never get me, right? And he went and so the guy that was working for me, who was probably about 20 feet away from me, he rolled him over. He had a Crown Royal bag on him. He had some drugs in the bag, which I was shocked. And he had probably about 6 or 7, maybe $8,000 on him that he hadn't given to me yet because I just pulled up. They just, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And the officers went into a huddle and said, I saw Lucky through it. Because he said immediately, like, that's mine. All is mine. And the officer said, they went into a huddle and they said, man, I saw Lucky through it. And I was on the ground. I was like, what? And they said, yeah, Lucky. So it was 4 officers. They plotted this, wow. Right? And so they ended up taking me to jail. They charged me and charged him. And that was the turning point of me because at that particular time, I didn't believe, I was so naive, I didn't believe that officers would put their hand on the Bible and lie. I was so naive. I thought like, wow, there's nowhere in the world that a police officer, I was very naive. Yeah. But these officers, 4 of them, veteran narcotics, were willing to lie under oath and said that they saw me throw some drugs and those are my drugs, right? That's crazy. And so that, but in hindsight, that kind of opened my eyes to a lot because it made me start trying to figure out how could that be. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to your question. I'm standing in front of a judge. I paid a lawyer, paid him a lot of money. He said I can beat it. I had affidavits, I had witnesses. And when it came down to going to trial, he said to me, something just made me say, how you feeling? I just wanted that reassurance, right? And he said, man, we can go in here and try. He said, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a white lawyer, a white judge. I mean, you're going to get a white judge, white jury, white prosecutor, and they ain't going to be able to identify with you. And he said, man, it's a 50-50. And at the time, the judge was saying, you got to do something. So 2 weeks later, I went for an open plea to say those were my drugs, which they weren't my drugs, because I was facing 5 to 99 to life. Mm-hmm. And I went before the judge, right? And the judge, I had some character witnesses, and the judge said that I was a menace to society, that I belong in prison. And then I remember, like, when he said that, in my head, I was saying, but Judge, you don't understand, like, I'm from East Dallas, like, man, I'm really a good guy. I just had to be this to survive, like my neighborhood, you got to be this, but that's not really who I am. I just had to do that to survive, you know, all that, right? Mm-hmm. But it never came out my mouth, but it was in my head. Yeah. And so I never forget, as they led me out, Judge sentenced me. I looked at my mother, and she had this disappointed look on her face, like her heart was broke. Wow. Like she was broke. I was the oldest. So imagine A on the road talent gives a student to a judge saying you're a menace to society on your first charge and sending you to prison. Wow. And so I went in prison very, very, introspective, and looking at my life and saying, how the hell did that happen? How did I go from this to this? And I wanted answers to that question. So I went into prison with that in my head. I wanted to answer that question. Wow. So at this time, how old were you? I was 19, maybe 20 years old. Wow. It was May 21st. May 7th, my daughter was born, my first child. And I remember saying I didn't want to be to my daughter what my father was to me, and that was absent. Oh, my God. And so here I am, 2 weeks later after she was born, the judge was sentencing me to prison. Wow. And what was the sentence? Well, how long? He gave me 7 years. 7, okay. Mm-hmm. And this is the federal penitentiary? Regular state, yeah. Okay. And you're going in at this point, it's like everything changed in a moment. Right. In a day. Like in a second. Right. Now you're in this place where everything is just different. Right. What were your emotions outside of that introspection of like, how did I get here? Yeah. Was it fear? Was it? Yeah, it was. Were you on a defense? Like, what was it? It was definitely a lot of fear and a lot of unknown. Yeah. Because you got to imagine going into prison, right, at that particular time, as a leader of the Bloods. That come with a lot of challenges, right? And I know that. I wasn't scared of the challenges that came with it, but it was just that unknown. I could get in this system and get lost in this system, you know, because I'm gonna have to make a choice, either stand up and defend that, and that comes with a lot, or I can make a choice to try to change the trajectory of that. And so that's what I wrestle with, you know, just the fear of trying to be and find my authentic voice of who I was, right? And so that was the fear going in, you know, going in like that.
Okay, and that definitely speaks to any kind of uncertainty. Even
Yeah.
though I know we're talking about something so traumatic,
Yeah.
I find that like there are times in my life where I'm facing some kind of uncertainty on the
Yeah.
other side of faith.
Right.
Like you don't know. It's the
Right.
fear of the unknown and dealing with all the emotions of
Right.
like what to do. You feel like you're at a crossroads.
Right.
What was
and,
it?
and hovering over that was the fact that I'm leaving a newborn little girl in the free. That right there was kind of a strong driver for me, because I was excited, and I'm excited, and trying to figure it out, during the pregnancy, and I'm saying, man, I gotta be here for my daughter.
Yeah.
And then boom, I'm snatched away from that situation. So I'm struggling with wanting to be out, wanting to be there for my daughter, and then upholding the reputation that I've amassed in the streets. Like which one you gonna go? That's the choices that I was sitting here thinking, like, I know if I uphold who I am in the streets, then that could provide consequences to my daughter, because I can end up I can end up being there 10, 15 years, upholding that. Or do I go against that, find my authentic voice of who I am, and make choices so that I can get back to my daughter?
And what'd you choose?
I chose to get back to my daughter.
Absolutely.
I denounced my gang in prison. I denounced my gang involvement in prison, because I went into prison like, people were, and I got to give a shout out to my mentor in prison, Willie Ray Fleming. This was a brother who was older than me, who seen me coming out the chow hall one day. I was fresh. I went on 3 months in, and his words to me when he caught up with me on the bowling alley was, "Hey man, I need to talk to you." And I didn't know who he was. He was older, and he said, "Look, little brother," he said, "Man, all these men in here, they talking about you. They paying homage to you, treating you like you're a celebrity. They falling out of place to come see you, et cetera, et cetera." And he said, "Man, if you can lead these brothers to do wrong, little brother, you can lead them to do right." He said, "You're a leader." And when he said that, that just kind of, that opened up a lot for me, right? Because he then became my mentor. I denounced the gang. I started teaching in prison, and the rest was history.
Wow, that is so powerful. While you're talking about that, one of the things that God will inspire me to do is to release a word, like a prophetic word, which is why it's called practical and prophetic. I have been talking about this revelation God has been giving me about getting back to your authentic self is getting to what God intended and not what we altered.
Yes.
And so what I'm hearing is you're denouncing the gang and denouncing your involvement was actually you getting back to you in the first place.
No doubt.
Because that was never you anyway.
We all layer ourselves according to the environment that we come from, and according to the stimuli that's in the environment, whether they're good or bad. As a kid, as you're trying to protect yourself, you think you're protecting yourself by layering all these layers on, these labels on that you put on. And sometimes people get lost in that. Like, you have a nickname, Crazy D. So you think you got to be crazy. And so sometimes people can get lost in the labels, lost in the layering, and they forget who they are. And just as you said, for me, as I started peeling back the layers I started identifying like all of the ideas that shaped all my cognitive distortions. That's what I call them, like all the stuff that started shaping how I saw. And being real with myself, I had to be real and say, Dallas, we weren't known for gang banging. That's something that we picked up from California. That was their custom.
Yeah.
They did that. We adopted that. So if I'm being true to my authentic self, I have to accept it. I have to challenge myself on that. I have to say, no, that ain't who you are. that your mama didn't raise no drug dealer, that this information that you got in the streets took you off the path. And so I was, as you said, I was finding myself coming back to the past. I was looking in that stainless steel mirror at what it was reflecting and being real with myself. You know, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be real with me. I had got tired of like being all of the other stuff. I wanted to be real. And I saw a lot of men in prison who were lost. They were lost under these labels, and they weren't being accountable to themselves, and they were spending a lot of time lying to each other on the rec yard and all. And I didn't want to be that.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to be that. I was missing my daughter. I was missing my freedom. I realized immediately in prison that this wasn't a place for me.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, this one where I wanted to be. Like, I had too much to offer. So I wanted to make that. I wanted to make that change.
Wow, that's so powerful, and that actually takes more strength to come back to yourself than it does to live a lie.
Oh yeah, it's about vulnerability, about being vulnerable. And I think that's what I realized too, Tara. I realized that a lot of men didn't want to be vulnerable because we had been taught being vulnerable, men being able to show feelings and emotions, that means you weak. And I realized, because I looked at myself as like the sacrificial, because you got to imagine me denouncing my gang, something I would never advise. I probably would, but now I don't know. But me denouncing my gang, being in tune with my feelings, being able to say I missed this, all that kind of stuff that normally prison is the opposite of. Yeah. You got to be tough, you got to be hard, you got to be this. You know, and I was leading with that, right? Dudes was looking at me like, and I was really leading with that. Like, I wasn't faking or shaking. Like, I'm really leading with that, you know? And so dudes were looking at me like, man, what's up with this brother? But I was so for real and so real about it that I learned that vulnerability is strength, that you are strong when you can be vulnerable, right? That's your medicine. Like, I learned that. Like, this your medicine. Like, because in my vulnerability and me walking my vulnerability out in front of people, it was giving other people strength. You know, it was making other people say, and I didn't know that, but it was making other people say, man, if he can do it, I can do it.
Wow. I need to stop you on this because, first of all, you in the vein. You was in the prophetic flow. I just recorded a segment, and I said this even on the episode that I did with another guest, called your greatest victory will come out of your vulnerability with God.
Yes.
And I talked about how some of my, perceived highest points in my life or greatest victories that people can see, whether it's on a platform, in my personal life, came out of my times where I became the most vulnerable, the most undone with God. And even Hannah, remember Hannah, she was at the end of herself when she came to a point where she was dealing with like hope deferred, disappointment, embarrassment. She couldn't go forward. What changed her trajectory is her coming to God as she was without everything else. Like, this was a woman who was a woman of prayer.
Right.
She didn't pray a pretty prayer.
Yes.
She prayed up, she let her rip.
Yes.
She came to God with her vulnerable, human, flawed feelings. And in exchange, he gave her beauty for those ashes. So what would you say, real quick, before we get into like your turning point outside of prison, what would you say to the person that's struggling now, dealing with like, maybe there's somebody out there that they can identify, man, I am living underneath a lot of layers of what this person said. Whether it's my job is my layer, my profession is my layer, my relationship status is my layer. How do I get back to this version of me? How do I identify the root of where am I at? Who am I?
Man, and I'm gonna tell you that's so good, because I think too, for me, right, God played a big part in everything that I did, right? I prayed, boy, I talked to God, I studied the whole 9 yards, man. So much so that brothers used to try to pull me away from the table.
Wow.
Cause I got the Bible, I got everything, and they trying to pull me away from it because I just became a student. But I think what I realized too, like even in my journey, when you begin, see, God is no God but God. You feel me? It's no God but God, man. and God is a jealous God. And so what I realized, right, when I started unlayering the layers, and I know this is going to speak to somebody, that you have to understand that sometimes you could be practicing a form of idolatry and not even know it.
Ooh, talk
Feel me?
about it. Talk.
You could be practicing the form, and this is what I learned. See, I learned like all of the things that I thought it was important, you know, reputation, money, material thing. I wanted that stuff, and I idolized that stuff so much that it became my God. And I didn't understand that. You know, when we look, it became my God. Like, I started going through that, right? And so I had to understand that. I had to understand that, you know, the perception, you know, you could get so caught up in worshiping the perception, right? You can work the perception that it become your God, that you doing everything for the pleasement of people or self-aggrandizement and all that good stuff. And it become your God. Worship no other God. And so it become your God. When that stuff's the external, when you start working on the internal you, nothing on the external can get you when you strong right there. When you work on the internal, then you can change and you can manage, you know, everything else. But if the external is more important than what's on the inside, then you in trouble. So I started realizing that, right? A lot of stuff that I cared about that didn't give me no intrinsic value, but for me to feel a certain way, that was a form of idolatry when I did that. When I realized that a lot of that stuff didn't matter to me, you know. I was the brother that was in prison. When I got a visit, I could work on the back dock, and I'd be walking straight to the visiting room with my back dock clothes on. And the men in prison, they looked at that as a sin. Like, you got to have some tight whites on with some shiny boots and et cetera. And that stuff didn't mean nothing to me.
Wow.
I cared more about fixing on the inside of me,
My God.
being able to love my brother, you know, as Jesus said. You know, that became more important to me. You know, so in prison, I was the brother who was connecting with the Aryan Brotherhood. I was the brother connecting with the Crips. Cause I now see differently.
My God.
You know, I see differently. You know, a lot of times we have these labels that prevents us from showing the love that God showed us, right?
Good God Almighty.
And so when I started seeing differently, man, I started loving differently. So I would help anybody. I would feed anybody. I didn't care. I wasn't bound by the norms of the prison. I was operating at least
By the Spirit.
By the Spirit.
First off, this is so powerful. You are preaching on this podcast for sure, for sure. Like, you literally captured the heart of God.
Yeah.
And it's just like God taught you himself through the word.
Yes.
You had your experience came just out of you and God and the word. I've been talking about recently, like, I've been going live and I released these prophetic words, how the heart of God is really to be spirit-led and know that God doesn't pick based on preferences. So you even push past your preferences. You said you started figuring out how to love everybody. And how to connect and relate to impact everybody. It started with my block. You know what I'm saying? It started with this, you know, my territory, my hood, my side. And now you're in this transformative space through the word of God. Taking accountability and actively seeking him. You're not just reading this thing, you're becoming it. Right. That's crazy. That's powerful.
And that was, and you absolutely correct. And that was, you know, I noticed that, like, when I started understanding from those veins, from a spiritual vein, it was just different. It was different. And it was like weights lifting off of you, because now you can connect with anybody. You know, you can connect with anybody and you don't have no motive, because you loving them as God loved you. You know, how can you love a God you don't see and don't love your brother you see every day? You know, and so I was looking at that, and I was understanding the message that Jesus was giving us. I was down in the message, you know, looking at the different situations, like you know, with Job and everything that he went through, you know, and I understood that the devil didn't have no power but to whisper. You know, the devil don't have no power but to whisper, you know, and it's up to you to heed that whisper now. You have the power to not listen to the whisper. So when I started seeing people, when you understand,
That's good,
man. When you start understanding like how the devil works, right? You know, he don't have no power, no control over you, but his whisper. Don't like that dude. He ain't nothing. She don't like you. Da 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 da. All that stuff right there, right? That just it comes in the form of a whisper, but you have the ability to not yield to the whisper.
wow.
See, so I can start looking at people when people doing something that I don't like. They ain't hating. They just being tricked by the devil. They just being whispered because it ain't them. It's the devil whispering to them, and they bowing down to that whisper. You know, from a spiritual perspective, you start seeing stuff like that. So stuff don't affect you as much as it would if you didn't see like that. You know, I'm able to acknowledge the origin of when people act like that, right? I was just talking on my way here about a lady that I couldn't understand why every time I would come around her, as cordial as I would be, she just had this nastiness about herself. It never made me hate her. It just made me understand the whispers of the devil, you know. And then come to find out when it finally it finally unraveled, you know, this lady was being entertained by the whisper. You know, totally misunderstanding, don't know, you know, just created a narrative and run with it. But when you're in the spiritual lens, man, you get to see differently. You know that. You get to see differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. My heart is just really it seems like exploding with this revelation. It's so power packed. So now you're in this space where you're different. You're coming back to who God created you to be. So how did all of that play a role into you being released?
Oh yeah, that was, man. It was divine, because you know, I was doing the work on the inside, doing the work on me, truly doing the work, truly, and giving all praises to God. I wasn't saying it was me. I was giving God His praises for everything I do. But in prison, I wanted to come back. I said in prison that I wanted to come back to my neighborhood, and I wanted to fix everything that I played a part in destroying. Right.
You about to make me cry.
I said that
because you're doing it. Actually.
Yes,
Wow.
I said that in prison. I got dudes who were locked up with me, right? Who used to walk the rec yard with me every day, and they used to hear my plans.
Yeah.
Because imagine I'm this young brother in prison. I'm studying, you know, righteous, you know, to a certain degree, you know, perfect, but not striving for perfection, but not perfect. But I'm living my life out in front of these brothers, right? And I'm telling them everything that I'm gonna do when I get out. Because they telling me, man, you're going to have an X on your back. You ain't going to be able to get a job. You ain't going to be able to get an apartment. And I'm looking at them like, man, if that's the case, if the X is what keep me out of opportunities, then I'm going to make the X on my back be what get me opportunities. I was telling brothers this.
Wow. Talk about speaker thing.
Man, I'm telling these brothers. These brothers saying, man, it's no way you're going to go back to the drugs. You're going to go back to this. And they didn't know, man. I had did the internal work. I was working on me internally. It wasn't no fake. It wasn't no act. So I told them everything that I was gonna do, and I remember this when I knew like it was something special about me. It was customary that when people got out of prison, you go see your friends and you show them love before you leave. They wish you off well. They wish you off. When it got time for me to get released, all of the men, all of the brothers, these brothers are older than me, man, they was in tears.
Wow.
They told me don't even come to their cells, to just go. They said the prison ain't gonna be the same.
Wow.
This is what these brothers told me. These dudes I'm talking about grown men were crying. I'm like bawling that I would leave. It almost made me question, should I leave? I said, man, I need to stay a little bit more long. I really had that conversation with myself, because these dudes that I had grown to love, they were like in tears, like, man, it's not gonna be the same without you. Because I had brothers, man, I was challenging brothers to be men. I was challenging these dudes to be men. Yeah. I was saying, you got to be a man. You got to take care of your responsibility. You got to do this. Yeah. So look, I end up getting released. And probably about a month later, I was on the news. And then in the newspaper, then on the news, and it just went forever. I had met my mentor, Bishop Omar Jawar. We connected, and it was like God had sent him. God had gave me Willie Fleming in prison as a mentor to shape me, and then He gave me Bishop Omar outside of prison. And when we connected like this. We did the first gang peace treaty in Dallas. We brought 400 young Bloods and Crips together, signed a peace treaty. We worked in the schools, the juvenile departments. We started doing a whole bunch of stuff. I spent the last 24 years of my life dedicated to improving neighborhoods and communities and all that good stuff and just helping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, oh my God, that is, I'm having a whole emotional moment about your story because I see what you do, and I feel privileged, but I also know that there are people who know you even at a deeper capacity than me, and they see even more.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
It's just only been a few years for us, and the fact that like all that those years ago, you had nothing except for, in reality though, you had everything because you had God, but you had nothing.
Right.
You were facing opposition.
Yes.
When you stepped out of that prison, it was freedom in as it relates to the jail cell, but it was actually like all kinds of opposition ahead of you, but you made up in your mind and you were determined to do something more than what society or what your status or what your finances, and you walk right into that. What is that thing, real quick? Because people ask me, they say, Tara, you've been through a lot of things and we've seen it publicly, privately. How is it that you keep overcoming? They say, what is that thing? I want to ask you that today. Like, despite all that stuff, what is that thing?
Man, I'm gonna tell you, for me, and I sum it up like this: I really believe God for who He is. That's just another thing. See, faith is, and so I really believe that. If you doubt, then you're not having faith. I never doubted. I never doubted God promised to me, right? And I will say this. I'll be the first to say, just because you believe, just because you have faith, doesn't mean that you won't have tests. God gonna test you as just as much He'll bless you, and sometimes the test is part of the blessing. So I believe that, right? I came out believing it. I really believe that God, if I do the right thing, God was gonna bless me, right? And it wasn't easy. I was tested just like Job. I was tested just like all the other prophets. And I'm not calling myself a prophet, but I was tested by the examples. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't no piece of cake. It wasn't easy. But I never gave up. I never stopped believing. I never reneged on the promise that I made to God. I said, God, you let me out of here, I'm gonna do the work. Wow. And it's been many times where I've dealt with everything. I've been through a lot. Betrayal. I'm talking about
stolen from, lied on, talked about.
Boy, I can write a book on that, of all of the stuff, right? But I stayed committed. All of the people who didn't believe, I didn't get mad at them for not believing, because oftentimes we do that as people. If they don't see our vision, they don't see our dream, we get mad at the people. You see that all the time, people on Facebook. Friends will support you for family and all that stuff, right? I never worried about none of that stuff. I just kept working, man, and then I understood this principle that success for me isn't defined by like the things that I got or the money or the material stuff that I accumulate. Because remember, I told you that's a form of idolatry. Yeah. So I never worried about that. Yeah. Success for me is when you can run into people who say, my life is better, my life has changed, and they honestly say, my life has changed because I came in contact with Him.
Come on now.
See, that's success for me. When people can say that, when you got people going around saying it, and you, not only that, and you always giving and helping and exposing, you ain't hiding, you ain't harboring, you always pouring out to people, you ain't worried about nothing. When you do that, I really believe God bless you. God bless me tremendously because I do that. Like, I give, like I just give people. I help so many people.
And you give in so many ways.
Yes.
It's not just financially.
Not just financially.
You give opportunities.
Yes.
You give time.
Yes.
You give positions.
Yes.
I've known and seen that you put people in positions where other people would have been like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And what I love about you, Anton, and I feel like this is probably one of the biggest factors in your success, is that you never had the agenda to just stop at family.
Oh, no.
It's to go past your own personal, you know what I'm saying, your personal responsibility. And I feel like this is what I always say about favor. People talk about it like it's this thing that if I got some money, God favors me. But favor is an endowment with God to do something that's supposed to move past you.
Yes.
And if you're willing to operate in that place, you will be a beneficiary of that favor.
Man.
It's an endowment.
Yes, indeed.
Every person in the Bible who was favored, they had an assignment to fulfill something outside of just their personal sphere of influence. And you had the heart and the mind of God to do just that. So now today, y'all, we finna have to go down the list because we really about to have to go down the list because Anton, can you tell us, excuse me, outside of, you got this book that you've written, which we'll talk about that here in a second, but what are some of the things that you're doing today that you said years ago, this is what I'm going to do?
Everything that I'm doing today, I'm going to go backwards. Everything that I'm doing today is what I envisioned when I was in prison, namely what I'm most proud of today. And I'm proud of a lot of stuff. But I'm proud of the same neighborhood. I talked about it in my book that I want to go back and help. The same neighborhood, I started a company and was able to purchase 100 lots in my neighborhood that I grew up in. I'm building 100 houses. We just put up 10 affordable housing. Bought the whole block, man. A couple of blocks, as a matter of fact. And so I'm building affordable housing in my neighborhood. That's a beautiful thing that's happening. Doing a coffee shop, which you're a part of. Shout out to Tara, because I'm telling you, I said I had to go get the goat because I'm opening up a coffee shop in my neighborhood, and you have helped me tremendously on that, so thank you for that.
You're so welcome. It's a privilege.
Yeah, so I got that, and then on the same street, this is how I grew up at. I just received $1 million grant to build a boxing gym.
Praise God.
For the kids of the neighborhood, where they'll come patronize. They think they're getting boxing, learning boxing, but it's going to be mentors. They're going to get mentors, and they don't have to pay a dime for that. Got that going. I have a security company that employs, right now I got 22 employees. Every last one of them is returning citizens, coming home from prison, and they working.
You are reducing recidivism.
Yes, and I'm paying them a decent wage too.
Wow.
So I'm proud of that, and it's growing. The organization, Urban Specialists, we're a big organization. We have about 20 to 25 employees that me and Omar started the organization together. He transitioned in 2021, and so I've been leading the organization. I'm so proud of that because we do a lot of stuff. We teach entrepreneurship to urban entrepreneurs, graduating. I love that. It's a lot of stuff. I'm traveling the country speaking. I'm on the speaking servant sector. I'm doing that. It's a lot of stuff that I'm doing. I know I'm missing out some stuff, but
you
those
are
just
missing
like
out
some
stuff. But my God, wow, such an inspiration. And it's so amazing to be able to see how all these things came to pass.
Yeah.
But I love how you kind of like painted the picture and told the story of you. It's all started with the internal work.
Oh, you got to do the internal.
I think so many times we miss that. And we coming to a close here in our episode because we gotta bring Anton back. Okay. We gotta bring him back because this is just a drop in the bucket to who you are and what you're doing and how God has moved in you. But a lot of times we tend to have all these ambitions and we put the cart before the horse thinking that, hey, I need to go do all this stuff without the internal work. And now a lot of people are successful from an external standpoint, but this is how you get people who have a lot of money and all this, and then but suicidal,
drugs, everything.
Or you have people who it's like, God has a calling on your life, and sometimes you wondering like, why can't I go forward? And He said, no, it starts within. Right? It's an inside job first, and then God will release us to go out. So just to encourage some of our viewers today, like that may be anywhere in this story, what would you say?
And I'm gonna say, I'll say this to him, and I forgot to mention, I'd be remiss not to mention that I am a Black mental health advocate. I believe in therapy, so I have a therapist. Shout out to my therapist, Tara McDaniel at the Thrive House. I'm always giving her a shout out.
Yes,
Thrive House Wellness, man.
Praise
so I go
God.
to, and I, and the good thing about it, like I document and journey every time I go into my therapy sessions, which have helped me tremendously. So I would say to anybody out there that you have to do the internal work, and the internal work is going and really addressing those cognitive distortions that we all get from childhood. And sometimes we get it because we try to protect the little boy and the little girl in us. But some of the stuff that we picked up, even from our families, could be the wrong information. And we got to go and deal with that. You know, I got a chapter in my book, chapter 2, the boy is the father of the man. And the whole meaning of that title is, in order to know a person as a man, you got to understand him as a boy. You got to understand the experiences that he went through as a boy to understand him as a man. And so, but that's all about therapy. That's all about understanding. We all have this person inside of us, that original, authentic self. We got to go back and just pull those layers back and be honest with ourselves. Pull those layers. It's hard. It's not easy when you're addressing, you know, these ideas that you've shaped, these ideas that done patterned you for your whole life. And in most cases, sometimes they protected you, but sometimes those ideas, what you try to protect people from the outside, but you end up blocking people from coming in. You block the information that can help you internally. And so I would say, work on yourself. Go to therapy, get some therapy, because you can't do it by yourself. Get some therapy along with understanding from a spiritual perspective as well. I think having spirituality and having a therapy is dope. And for me, it has worked for me. It has really worked for me. I liken myself like the prophet Jonah. You know, God gave him a mission when I was an A honor roll student. I ran from that mission. He causes the whale to swallow me up. So in the well, if you notice, Jonah didn't fight nothing in the well. I didn't get into prison and continue doing the stuff. I'm mad at the guards. I got on my knees and I prayed. And God caused the whale to spit me up. And if you remember in the Bible, Jonah was the only prophet that went to a city of people, the people of Nineveh, and they all believed, you know, when he came back with his message. So I look at my life like that. Like, I'm going to those people who are receptive, and I'm just walking in it. I'm not proselytizing. I'm just, see, the best thing, Jesus was the example. You know, that's the example. You know, the best way to win people over and get people to understand is be the example. Be the example of that. And regardless, and you're going to get attacked. You're going to have people that hate you. You're going to have people that misunderstand it. But you can't become what you hate. You can't become them. You can't become like them. You got to keep walking in your truth. You got to keep walking in your vein, and then let that be what grab people on. Because some of the people that used to be laughing at me when I first started out, I was broke as a joke. Some of them people that were laughing at me, they work for me now. See, I could have been like you were laughing at me on the come up, and my heart can be hardened for that.
Like, oh, I ain't gonna help you.
I ain't gonna help you. Right. But see, now God don't let us do that. Come on. If you ready, come on. And some of those brothers right now work for me.
Wow.
And I don't never shame them. I don't look how big you. I don't never do that. I'm always treating people right, treating people how I want to be treated. And I think that's the reason why God continued to bless me.
It is. Oh, Jesus, we got to go, but why did you do that? It is this very thing that we've been talking about, here in the Learn with Tara ministry, is not allowing other people to alter who you are. And that could go into, like, from a relational standpoint, that could go from a marital standpoint, from a familial standpoint. None of the experiences that you've had, and even today, the experiences that you may have, you don't let that alter you at your core. No. You're still moving authentically in love. You're giving love freely. You're giving time, money, all this. And God keep giving you abundance. You got $1 million grant from a city who is historically known to be very, very, you know, it's hard to get that, right? It's hard, and God has just set you up.
It was God all in that.
He just set you up, and look at what you're about to do. You're about to continue to impact. Listen,
150 people applied for it.
What?
150 people applied for the grant, and we beat all 150. I beat all 150 people out for that. And I want to say this before we go. I know we got to wrap up, but I want to say this too, Ty. You keep doing what you're doing because you're a blessing. You know, what you're doing, you're a blessing. God going to continue to bless you because you're a blessing. And everything that you said to me, I can say about you because I've watched you. And look here, somebody reached out to me. You don't even know this because I never even said it to you. somebody reached out to me couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and asked me, did I know you? And I said, why? They said, because she's doing this thing for ladies and da-da-da, and they're going out the country and da-da-da, and I like her and da-da-da, and I be tuning into her lives. Wow. And I said, she the truth in the booth.
Wow.
I said, she the truth in the booth. She said, I want to go with her on one of her retreats. The lady reached out to me, and I don't know how. She has no way of knowing that I'm connected. She was just asking me, because I'm from Dallas, she not from Dallas, did I know you? She didn't know that I knew you. And I said, oh, she the truth in the booth. So you never know how many people's lives that you impacting when you're doing this kind of work. And you impacting people's lives, so you keep doing your thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, my God. That just really spoke to me. I've been praying about the retreat and saying, God, is this something I need to do? You know?
Yeah.
And you just gave me confirmation.
Wow. In
this season. Oh, it's been such an honor having you here, y'all. Did you enjoy this? Did you enjoy this episode? If you did, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, make sure you pass this on, share this with some other men, share this with some other women.
Yes.
Right? This was definitely a God-inspired session. And also, we have Anton's book. Can you let us know, like, where can we find this book? Because we need to know more. Yes,
because if I wouldn't have said this, my assistant would have called me and said, you mean you didn't promote the book? But they be on me like that.
We got you covered.
Yeah, thank you,
we the backup.
Yeah, thank you, because I was going to walk out of here without doing it, because I got to get used to doing it. But yes, it's a redemptive path forward from incarceration to a life of activism. It chronicles my life, the journey. It's a blueprint for any brother, sister that's incarcerated, or just a person that's incarcerated in their mind on how to navigate and reach your authentic self. You can go on Amazon to get that book. You can go on antonspeaks.com. That's my website. Barnes and Noble. Well, anywhere books are sold, Audible, Kindle, wherever you go, you can go get that book. But go get that book, send it to a loved one, and then you can follow me, Anton Speaks, on all social media platforms. I do a radio show every Sunday morning on 105.7 at 9:30. Make sure y'all tune in. I'm gonna have Tara on my show next. You gonna come on the show?
I'm coming.
I got you. You gonna come on the show. We're gonna do that. You just tell me when and we coming. We're gonna make it happen.
We're gonna make it happen.
Already. Thank you for having me though.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Until next time, God bless you.